Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage. Well, today we made some progress since you last saw. We're going into the cab of the truck here. We've got the mounts installed in the rear here. Got them all welded up. Got the bushings are in there and the bolts are in there. They're loose at the moment, but it's all bolted up, so we are sitting on weight on the mounts on this side. I have not put the top two holes in on either side yet. That I'm waiting till after I get all of the mounts put in and everything seems like it's going to work good the way it is, and then I'll go ahead and drill those top holes, mainly just because they're quite a bit more challenging to put in than some of the other ones. This side isn't so bad because I'll be cutting the floor out to drill or to change around anyway, so I'll just be able to get right in there. On the passenger side here, I actually may cut open a section of the floor to drill the holes and then put it back in, because I do not want to have to take the cab off just for that. So other than that though, the placement's looking really good. It's sitting off center a little bit in the camera, but actually that floor pan is actually not centered. The hump there sits offset, I think, as I mentioned in the previous video, and the motor is actually sitting center line at the moment, slightly off center by maybe a 1/4 inch or so, but it's more or less on center line. And the main reason is that this way it puts the weight a little more centered, and it also helps somewhat with the clearance of everything, because if we go around front here, and as you saw in some of the earlier videos, it's a little bit tight and I really can't put it where the factory would have done anyway, otherwise I'd have big clearance issues. But if we're going around the front here, there there's been a few changes, unfortunately, in the since we had a last iteration of this. This is you may recognize this is a different mount. The ears are the same, and you can kind of see where I cut the old mount off of it. The other part of it is actually out here, sitting out on the outside here. This is the original mounting pad that I had made, and it was not bad. It was a little thin, but it was braced up pretty well, and the motor sat like this on it, and it worked really well. It would have been a good strong mount with just the tube welded there. The problem occurred when I went to go ahead and put the radiator in. The radiator shroud support basically sits right in here. You can kind of see it sits in between these mounts, and when I had the original mount in there, it cleared the radiator support just fine. And I had not taken into account at the time how the radiator sat in the mount. And here in a little bit, I'll put that back up and we'll be able to visualize that a little better. But basically what ended up happening was where the crank pulley and this kind of area here, the mount sat right in here, as you probably remember. And it also happened to line up almost exactly with where the outlet for the radiator is right about here, and it wants to come out and then swing in. And there's enough room between this and the radiator that you can swing a hose in, especially if I kind of nip this corner off a little bit to make that turn. But there is not enough room once there was a big piece of steel sitting right here. So this is the hopeful solution to that. This is pushed about as far back as I reasonably want to go, and this puts the mount basically under this pad here. So in theory, this buys me a lot more room and gives myself a lot more access for hoses, and also if I need to run anything in front. So yeah, she's back up on the hook for the moment. It's actually sitting on the engine stand at the moment, but the we're gonna go ahead and swip this mount back in place, and we'll bring you back when it's bolted up. Alright, well, it's been a little bit yet, but we have got actually quite a few things done now. The transmission mount that you saw earlier has now been installed into place, and the motor is sitting back on it. If we go underneath here, you can see the mount installed there. And I sneak you underneath here, you can kind of see what it is we're dealing with here, and the reason I had to move it. There is about 2 inches of clearance in between the rad hose and the mount there, and it is just enough that I can snake a hose around it if I move it all around, but the way that the old mount was, it was pretty much flush straight up against it. So this does not give me a ton of room, but at least it gives me enough that I can kind of finagle a solution, especially since this core support will come up a little bit. It at least gives me enough room to, with some additional clearancing on the engine mount there, I should be able to make something work, but we'll figure that out a little later. We're now also moving on to a few other things. The as you see, core support is sitting in the frame at the moment, although it's just sitting on the bushings. I don't have any of these spacers that go in here to get it to the correct height relative to the fenders and all that. But in addition to that, I do also have a few other things put in. I went ahead and put the overflow tank in, and I started running some of the wiring. You can kind of see there, I've got the power wire for the truck. The starter wire is still needs to be installed, but I also have been going in and I've started installing the starter solenoid and the two maxi fuses, or excuse me, mega fuses, that are going to replace the fusible links that this truck originally would have had, but are now no longer functional with the way that the wiring has been reworked. So basically the way that the wiring on this truck is going to go is the power from the battery is going to come into this right here. It's going to run to the starter solenoid here, just like it would have from the factory. This leg of the starter solenoid is going to go down to the trigger wire on the starter down there. This wire that's on the constant hot side will jump over to a bus bar between these two fuse holders, and then this first fuse holder here is going to feed the, let me see here, the first fuse holder is going to feed the battery, or the main power distribution box here. Get a light so you can see a little better here. And the second fuse holder there, the one closest to the firewall, is going to go over and feed the alternator, or rather it's going to be fed from the alternator. And I've also went ahead and extended that wire a little bit. I added some additional length onto the charge wire here to get it over there. The original location I had was kind of in the way of this coolant tank, and so we moved it down over there. I also relocated my steering, or excuse me, my cruise control servo there. Obviously it doesn't really have to be mounted anywhere specifically. All it has to have is the cable mounted down there on the throttle. It's that white tipped cable. It just has to be mounted somewhere that it can have a rigid mounting point. It doesn't have to be in any specific location. So that gives us a lot more room to run things, and it's also nice and protected back there and away from, in theory, a lot more road salt, water, etc., to kind of keep it more protected back there, since those are a little more exposed. But the motor is sitting in the frame now, at least. We do got a couple things I've still got to figure out before we can get her fired up here. The probably biggest one is if you look over in there, if I can get the light shining in there. It's kind of hard to see, but the starter solenoid currently contacts the driver's side engine mount, that lower kind of built up piece here. I don't know if I can maybe swing around and get you a better shot of that, but I've got to go ahead and try and clearance it. Well, you can't really see it as well, but it's basically this section right in here on the other side. And the reason for that is because I actually flipped this mount around to push the motor farther back a little bit. On the original design of these mounts, I did, and I originally had them flipped a little bit differently. I could actually probably flip this mount back the other way, and I am going to look into that a little bit. The only thing is that with flipping the mount around, the joining bracket here would also have to move. So I think I'm just going to probably clearance this a little bit and just give myself enough of a room for that starter to clear. The only other thing, that's not as big of a deal. The somewhat more major thing that I am currently trying to figure out, and if any of you all have any ideas about this, I would appreciate commenting and seeing if we can maybe work out a solution, is you can kind of see The solenoid is a little close to the pumpkin of the differential here. It's not currently actually sitting where it will sit. It will sit up about another, that's just kind of laying down at the moment. I don't have the top bolt in yet. It will sit up higher than that, but it still only gives me about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of clearance to the differential at the moment. Now, this has also got the original springs in it. I haven't put the heavier duty rated springs yet, or even the eventual plan of putting a set of Super Duty front springs on here with the shackle flip that will lift this truck up a little bit more, and that'll give me quite a bit more clearance to that differential. But at the moment, I've got a little bit of a tight fit with the factory type starter. I am actually currently looking into an option of potentially getting a gear reduction starter that would move the motor piece right here, move it up a few inches. It won't buy me much room, but it might buy me enough that it would get it out of the range of the differential and give myself enough room that it can articulate with the suspension. Other than that, the other thing I've got to currently contend with is I've got to cut some more of the floor out. I'll be rebuilding the whole floor anyway, so it's not that big of a deal, but I've got to give myself the room to get this clutch linkage hooked back up as I had originally designed it. And we'll probably have to modify that a little bit too, given the how things have kind of fitted up. But the main thing what we're working on at the moment is back in here. I've got my adapter pulled off at the moment, and it's over here on the bench. The thing at the moment we're working on is we just got this all welded up on this transfer case side ring. Welds aren't prettiest for some of it. We are by no means expert fabricators, but it's hopefully going to be good and strong enough at least to hold it all together. And at a minimum, it doesn't have to look pretty as long as it holds. The main thing we did, though, is I went ahead and got this reclocked. The original bolt pattern here was mimicking a stock transfer case angle where the transfer case kind of sits about like this off of the truck. And I was running into problems with the fact that the engine is sitting on center line instead of off of center line a little bit, that the engine was now in a position that the transfer case would hit the frame rail on the driver's side there. So what I went ahead and did, also helping with my transmission mount, I went ahead and clocked this down about 15-20 degrees. I basically went, because each of these are the sets of holes. The other sets of holes are a initial set that I drilled that I had messed up on the bolt hole sizing, or the spacing, excuse me. But I went ahead and clocked it down about in line with moving it from a hole here to one of these holes. So about 20 degrees of downward angle. And that, having mocked it up already in the truck, it looks like we're going to have enough room to get the transfer case in there. And so I went ahead and got this all fully welded up, and I'll go ahead and get this reinstalled, put the sealant on the shims, get this bolted in, and also probably go in and try to get the seal that goes in here installed and get that all sealed up so that way I can actually get some oil in the transmission and hopefully get the transmission at least ready to go. Other than that, we're kind of getting down to a short list to get a test fire in this thing. I've got to mainly get oil and filters in this. I've got to figure out a fuel system at the moment, even if it might be a temporary setup. The main thing though is I've got to do a little bit more wiring and getting all of the engine, the senders, as well as the vehicle wiring itself to work to where it'll perform as I want it to, because albeit this is an all-mechanical engine, but I have the shutdown solenoid and the alternator on there, and I would like it to at least, when I fire it up, hopefully get the alternator to start charging, see if that's going to all work, as well as a few other little things to make it all just a little more functional. The other thing that we went ahead and did, I got the battery tray swapped around. It's not that big a deal, but this has a different style mounting bracket. It puts the battery tray slightly more forward, and it also gives me a little bit more room that I can cut out the support down here, which is not supporting anything anymore, to allow the room for the boost pipe to come through here. And I also got the air box, or the air filter box, all securely mounted and ready to go, so I can get the boot that'll connect it to the turbo. But other than that, we're going to probably move ahead and we're going to try and get the transfer case, adapter, and the related parts all buttoned up and keep going on that. But I think that's where I'll end this one. Stay tuned for more updates, and I appreciate y'all watching everything, and hopefully here in the next couple videos, I'm hoping in possibly the end of the next video, maybe one more, we'll have everything buttoned up and we can try to fire this thing off for the first time and see how it sounds in the truck. So appreciate y'all watching. Catch you later. See you later.